Welcome to episode 89 of the Startup Playbook podcast. My guest for today's episode is Anthony Kennada, the CMO of Gainsight. Anthony started his career as a business development manager at Box before joining Symantec as a senior product manager. He then took on his first marketing role, joining Gainsight as employee number 19 to build out their marketing team. Gainsight has gone on to become the world's leading customer success management platform, helping businesses to grow faster by reducing churn, increasing upsell, and driving customer advocacy. The business has raised over $150 million of venture funding to date. I had so much fun recording this interview with Anthony, where we covered a range of topics across marketing and startups, including the compounding value of community, when startups should think about their brand, the challenges of building out a new category, and marketing from first principles. Without further ado, here's my interview with Anthony Kennada. Hi, Anthony. Welcome to the Startup Playbook podcast, and thanks so much for taking the time to be on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to have you on, and so much stuff to talk about as well. For those people that may not be as familiar with you or your background, do you want to share a little bit about your story and what got you here today?
Yeah, sounds great. So I am currently the CMO at Gainsight. We're a company focused really on evangelizing this new profession of customer success, as well as developing technology to help operationalize the workflow of customer success teams. I'm a first-time marketer, which I think we'll unpack here in a little bit, but my journey started from Box kind of in the early days, about 30 employees, really from the biz dev kind of function there. Joined a company that was in the security space, again in business development quickly thereafter. Fortuitously, that the CEO was Nick, who's currently our CEO at Gainsight, and so we had kind of one run together at that company called Live Office. We sold the business to Symantec. Stayed at Symantec for a little while, did the kind of big company thing, which was a lot of fun. I ran a product group, which really helped kind of foster my appreciation, I guess, for building things, which I sort of didn't have as much on the partner side. And then very quickly, kind of after Nick had his or the proper term of golden handcuffs is, but basically when his time at Symantec was done, he went off and found this company in St. Louis that was focusing on reimagining the customer relationship, and he gave me a call and asked me to run marketing, and it's been an amazing 5.5 years kind of building this thing ever since.
Fantastic. I mean, obviously, there's so many things that I want to dive in deeper with you on, but just going back to your earlier point that this is essentially your first marketing role as well. What was that transition like for you from going from business development into marketing? And do you think that that's been a hindrance or an advantage for you as you've been able to grow Gainsight? Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely been an incredible learning opportunity to really learn while doing. But I also think what's interesting about marketing is it's been reinvented so much in the last decade that, had I been a tenured 20-year marketing veteran, I don't know that we would have been any better off. In fact, it probably would have been more of a hindrance. And business development and product, to me at least, gave me the context of, first of all, how to think from a sales kind of point of view. So I definitely had the sales appreciation there. On the product side, how to work with engineering and kind of understand customer kind of pain, translate that into something that an engineer can go and build off of. So these were, it's like a hindsight 2020 thing where I think all of those different pieces helped make me a better marketer, almost hopefully, I mean, we'll see, but hopefully better than had I been a kind of tenured and trained marketer kind of beforehand. So I think they were complementary, hopefully more than any type of hindrance.
Sure. Just doing a bit of research and reading into you as well prior to us doing this interview, I was going through your LinkedIn profile, and one of the things that I loved that you mentioned in your bio was I'm a B2C marketer trapped in a B2B body.
Yes.
And I love that because, and again, something that we were talking about before we turned on the mic and something that we focus a lot of Playbook Media is even if you're selling into a B2B environment, you're still selling to a person.
Yeah.
And so, would love for you to sort of elaborate on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what's interesting is, and this isn't disconnected from your prior question of, coming into a role from a first principles point of view and trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to go and market, both our product but also our business. And what we discovered, at least on the journey, is that we weren't going to be a business that was this wasn't going to be a category that was going to be won by a product-centric point of view. Customer success, the context of a customer isn't something that you can completely codify end to end because of the human component. That's very hard to sort of predict. Now, with that, I think you can find that other functions have a very similar approach. And so my observation was that across all of B2B, we've spent the last 10, 20 years trying to automate that relationship. Marketing automation is like a word that we use. And there's use for that, right? There's use for email as a point of engagement. But at the end of the day, there's I think, desire from folks on the other end of our emails, on the other end of our cold calls, to actually have value delivered to them. And how you deliver value is where it's getting really interesting for marketers that have a bend toward the creative, because in our consumer world, in our consumer lives, there's some incredibly interesting things happening. The way media is being distributed through mobile and all of these different things. Television networks are catching on, obviously, and doing interesting things. We're here podcasting is an interesting way to engage with folks, maybe on their commute into work or what have you. And so we as B2B marketers need to meet that person, not just that logo, where they already are, and find ways to deliver that value. And so for me, that just brought about a creative exercise and something that has we've seen work at Gainsight, at least in our last 5.5 years. We know that this investment in creative and brand actually fuels growth rather than distracts us from it. But also, it's a lot of fun, and there is this degree of efficacy where it's actually like delivering that value and enhancing the brand promise that Gainsight's building.
Absolutely. I mean, again, we were just talking about this before we turned on the mic, but a big part of the success for Playbook Media has been just a brand that's been built off the back of the podcast. Obviously for Gainsight as well. I think when I speak to a lot of founders and businesses, it's very hard to get the tangible outcome and look at community as a growth engine for your business. And especially in a B2B environment as well. A lot of the conversations that I have with founders in Australia is generally worried about the perception of the market if you do take risks or if you do kind of focus on that as well. And obviously from a Gainsight perspective, you guys have done some really interesting creative projects such as Carpool Karaoke and the rap song that you guys did as well. Again, I think it would just be really good to get an insight into what that has meant for you as a business and how you kind of approach that.
I'll touch on both of those things. I think the point you made on community is really important. Talk about the risk-taking, some of these creative kind of endeavors. But when you think about B2B in general as a marketer, what are some, and especially a young company, right? We're just building this. One of the key metrics is our database growing? Are we able to market to these folks? Are they filling out our forms? Are they engaging with us? Are we giving our sales team or SDR team enough to really go and fish? And one of the benefits of a community-driven approach versus a pure play kind of just funnel approach is that community compounds. If you can get 5 people from a target account to come to an event or to listen to your podcast, and now as you're looking at that account object in your marketing automation system, you have those 5 accounts. If you can deliver an amazing experience to them, they're going to tell other people. They're going to, that account is going to grow to 10, 20, 30 people that are now marketable and listening to what your brand has to say. And so I think that it's an important distinction that community for B2B is a strategic lever and not something that should be completely separate. You did mention Carpool Karaoke and rap songs and whatnot. I think part of our vision for that is that all of these things, the risks that we take that might seem very brand or corporate marketing focused, it's an extension of our content marketing. And what is content marketing? It's effectively a either acquisition channel or a nurture kind of program for somebody that's in your world. And so if we think about the market at large, we have the customer success community. Our vision is we want to be a lifestyle brand for those that are in the job. We want to do life with them. Because of the iPhone and other reasons, like the line is blurring between our work lives and our personal lives. And so what we're seeing is that people are listening to podcasts, work or career-oriented podcasts, on their drive into work. They're on Spotify, they're all on all these other kind of channels, and we want to be able to deliver value to them wherever they are. And so even if it's something as like simple as a song that's about their profession that they can get pumped up about on their drive in every day, we think that's just like yet another touch point. What it also does is, from an executive comms point of view, it helps bring that human dynamic to your own brand. And so for us, we're very lucky that we have Nick, who's a dynamic, authentic kind of person at the forefront of the company. But to this day, he'll tell us that if he has a meeting with a Fortune 100 executive that he's never met before, one of the first things that person will tell him is, "Loved you in carpool karaoke," or, "Hey, that rap song was really funny. You're a good actor," or whatever. And I think the risk there that we take is probably more financially oriented than anything else, because videos aren't, it's becoming easier, obviously, for us to produce some of this content. But if you're going to go do a high quality kind of, investment, those are, 5, 10, 15,000, whatever it is. And if you do that and get like 15 views or something, it kind of sucks, but your brand's not ruined, right? That it's a risk you could argue worth taking. There's also more of the more cost-effective ways to take that risk and try it. But I can promise you, there have been videos we've spent $20,000 on US and had about 13 views on YouTube, and so we have fallen flat. And I think that the pot of gold and the reward at the end, if this is done right, is far, far greater than the risk of something that people won't hold it against you by any means.
Again, I think one of the things that often gets overlooked from a marketing perspective is there are like so many different ideas that you have.
Yeah.
And obviously, when it comes to sort of marketing and branding, it can be a bit of a hit and miss exercise.
Yeah.
So, is there a particular stage for companies where it makes sense for them to start focusing on the marketing and branding aspect, or is this something that they should be doing from the very beginning?
Yeah. My point of view is that from day one, and it may not be under the same umbrella as what you would consider brand, but I would argue content marketing is brand in general. And so having a corporate blog that isn't positioning your product, but is positioning the pain that the customer or the market at large is feeling, those are all brand investments. Because what you're doing is building equity with the market at large that we now have been able to demonstrate as an industry that is convertible into pipeline and is convertible into closed business. And so I think from day one, I would argue brand is the most important thing that you can do. And it's really positioning your company not as a vendor that's cold calling and selling, but as a trusted partner that has a big vision that is a kind of, I guess, servant leader approach to kind of realizing that vision, because they're going to do it by investing in you on the other end. And so I think that's something that you has to be in the DNA of the management team, and has to be something that's accepted. And you got to be willing to try things, and not everything costs a lot of money, but try things that might work and double down on that brand promise early.
Sure. Something again that you just touched on. I haven't met Nick, but from what I can tell, he's an amazing character.
Yes.
To work with. But obviously, not every marketer is in a position where their CEOs are as willing to accept some of these things. So for anyone that's kind of listening, and either they're a founder and deciding whether to do this themselves, or they're a marketer within a company, how should they approach the subject, or try and change minds, or at least get some sort of cut through?
Right. I got this question a lot, and honestly, I always feel a little bad, because we do have a very lucky gift in Nick. But what I will say is, what Nick does that is his true genius is authenticity, which for him means willing to be self-deprecating, willing to rap in front of 5,000 people, like all these sorts of things. And that works for him because that's a reflection of his own personality and kind of what he brings to the table. But I think what he's rewarded for in his sort of executive kind of presence in the market at large is more of that, the fact that he's willing to put himself out there. And so for those listening, for those that are like, all right, I'm more of an introvert, or I might, just not be willing to kind of put myself out there to that extent. or for me, like honestly, work is something I'm passionate about, but then I have these other things that I'm not comfortable kind of putting out there. I think it's all good and fine. But you should find what it is that makes you as a leader different. And maybe the risk is more there than on having to do a video or having to do a carpool karaoke campaign. Try something where you put a little bit of yourself out there that is a reflection of the leadership quality that you're bringing to the table and building your business, because at the end of the day, you are the brand. Like, you as the figurehead of the business are the brand that is the personification of the logo that people see at a trade show or on a billboard or what have you. And so there is this responsibility that comes, I think, with just a little bit of sort of, trying to live the values and the mission of the company publicly. Or if not you, hopefully someone in your executive team. I think there's plenty of examples of founders that might have a sort of COO or a co-founder or a CMO or someone who's sort of more of the public kind of figurehead of the business. And I think that's fine too. But just remember that responsibility to being kind of the personification of the brand in whatever that means to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting point as well. Like I mentioned on the podcast that I'm pretty introverted by nature, and so for me to get in front of a camera or even to do a podcast recording by myself for an extended period of time is really, really difficult. But I can have a conversation, I can ask questions and things like that. And so that was the medium and the format that worked for me. And so I think it's important for people, as you just mentioned, is not essentially trying to figure out a one size fits all, but trying to figure out what is the right format and piece of content, or what does that engagement look like for an individual or for a business.
Totally agree. Yep, makes sense.
The other thing that you kind of touched on as well is essentially, Gainsight helped build out a category. I've had Al Ramadan on the show, who kind of wrote the book Play Bigger, which we kind of dove in on. But again, really curious to know from your perspective of actually building that out from a Gainsight perspective as well. In hindsight, it's almost a no-brainer, in terms of absolutely this completely makes sense. But I imagine when you're at the very early stages of trying to build out a category, there are a number of challenges as well. What was it like in the early days of trying to launch a new category of product, and what were some of the things that you faced that you weren't potentially expecting? Yeah,
and I can assure you it wasn't us around a meeting table like this saying we're going to go build a new category. There's this book I read. It wasn't. I wish it were that sort of intentional. But one of the first things that we did, literally, less than a month into the job, and this was the benefit, just to level set from a context point of view, just closed a Series A round of financing, so there was a little bit of money in the bank, and we used that to sign a formal business agreement with Forrester and Gartner and other kind of analyst firms. And part of our first sort of onboarding, because Nick and I actually started right around the same time, maybe within a month of each other, was getting our very few customers that we had. I think we had like 5 to 8 customers in front of this analyst audience for us to share, and for our founder to share kind of the core value proposition as we saw it, and really get their take on what is this? Is this something that you've seen before? Are there other competitors out there that are thinking about this? And every single analyst came back with basically a evolution of an existing research area that they had. And so they said, you are proactive customer support. Predictive was hot back then, right? About 5 years ago. So you're predictive customer support. Somebody else said you are the future of account management. And we're like, kind of, like you're sort of close. Or you are CRM. We're like, oh my God, we do not want to, right? Like I can see the Salesforce tower from here. That'd be a bad thing. And so we said, okay, well, we don't feel like the conviction that we're any one of those existing categories. But what we did see is there was a job title that existed called the Customer Success Manager. And we knew that they sort of met online on LinkedIn, had this kind of peer-to-peer forum there, and they would meet about once a quarter at a different office around the Bay Area here. And we'd sit in on these meetings, and I'm talking like pizza and Pepsi, nothing, no high production or anything. And there was this energy, there was this excitement in the room that I'm finally around other people that are thinking about what I'm thinking about. And so what we said is, okay, as a hypothesis, what if we planned an event similar to what we were experiencing and tried to get as many folks there as possible that are in the profession. Forget about our company. We didn't even have we were still called JBera Software at the time. We weren't rebranded, no corporate website. It was like very early days. But what would it look like if we tried to get everyone together? And to our surprise, we had over 300 people there. And Jeffrey Moore gave the keynote, and Aaron Levy from Box, and Teen from Zuora, and several others. And what that did was validated that there is something here. There's a community here. There is an ability or a potential opportunity to tell a kind of best practices driven kind of story here. And so that's what we did. And we spent the next several years, only until probably about 3 years ago did we layer on some of the more traditional demand gen practices. But we built a kind of marketing team based around content marketing, live events, kind of different community bits as well. And that helped us grow from really about less than $1 million of ARR to probably around 15, 20 before really layering on the demand gen. And today it's still a big part of our strategy, and the demand gen investments are just fueling kind of the distribution and growth, getting more people enrolled into the community. And so only now do we look back and say, my gosh, there's a category around this customer success thing that is so different than support and account management and sales and everything else. But what didn't exist were the tactics and the playbook. And I think we're sort of writing that as an industry together now, at least for B2B.
Yeah. Again, just kind of touching on one of the points that you just mentioned as well, it can be really hard when you're doing something new to grasp or articulate what it is that you're doing or solving. For anyone that's kind of listening that's potentially in that position of doing something that's creating a new category or doing something that's kind of innovative but haven't been able to kind of grasp that. Do you have any recommendations on how to approach that? Yeah,
I mean, one thing we've observed is at the heart of most of category creation, or many of the examples we've uncovered, is a person, a customer. We're tying back a little bit, right, to what we opened with. But in our case, it was a new job function that was marginalized. Because it existed. We didn't invent it. Customer success was a job, but no one was championing them. No one was building a sort of, or championing a career path and creating the resources to really kind of invest, I guess, in the development of that industry. And so a lot of what we've done hasn't been Gainsight and going back into a room and whiteboarding. I mean, we've done that, obviously, but what we're whiteboarding is feedback that we've heard from customers and from prospects and just the market at large. And so I think what I would articulating value, articulating a message is something that is going to obviously keep happening the more the category evolves and the community evolves and your business evolves. But at the heart of it is always spending a lot of time with customers, validating your messages. There's services out there that help with that as well at scale, or to go into different kind of markets and geos and verticals and all those sorts of things. But at the heart of it is a top-down investment in putting the customer at the center of your kind of messaging development. And we're never done. We're never done with it. But we anchored around the term customer success because we knew the job existed, which gave us confidence, at least in the early days, that that's enough for now to really bet on. Yeah,
as you mentioned, that job is never done, and so I assume that messaging just keeps evolving over time as well. When do you realize the time is right to kind of switch over to a new form of messaging or to make that transition?
I think we've seen, at least in our experience, that the market kind of tells you a little bit. And so for us, a leading indicator of category development for us is the growth in our conference. And so we've gone from like 300 people in our first year to 5,200 this year. We have an event in Europe. We're bringing an event to Sydney in December. And those are, if the slope of that graph starts to change, or the demographics of that audience start to change, the types of sponsors that are getting engaged, like we have all of these just data points, what our customers are telling us in terms of different products they're using. So an example for customer success I'll share, maybe to make it very practical. We know that the product management industry is starting to have a vested interest in usage data for how customers and users of a product are actually engaging with the technology. Marketers are having a more vested interest in driving engagement post-sales, and really building kind of that end-to-end full funnel kind of engagement platform. So we're starting to ask ourselves, okay, first of all, from a product roadmap point of view, we have to really think about how our technology evolves, how our product evolves, but how does our message evolve in a world where it's no longer just this category that we've sort of helped create, but now we have traditional categories like marketing and product that are sort of getting invested in our movement that we're trying to create. Is it still customer success, or is it something else? Or can we get them to sort of come into the customer success story and narrative? It's hard, but that's something we're living today, and it's challenging us to really think through it. But I think the core principle is there still. We're observing the dynamics that are contributing to that. We're listening to our customers. We're taking that internally, and we're trying to come up with some some hypotheses around it. And then we want to take that back to our advocates and our customers and help validate some of that stuff before investing in a big kind of reinvention at the parent level. So definitely ongoing, but our experience is that it's sort of come to us, and we're just paying attention.
Sure. I guess one of the other things that would be really curious to know is how, I guess, the marketing function and the team has evolved over time as well. So I know that the core, from what I understand, the core of your marketing team is based in Phoenix.
It is based in Phoenix, Arizona, yeah.
Yeah. But again, I guess from the early stages of, I assume, more limited resources, how do you allocate resources in terms of hires, in terms of ideas or kind of different processes that you do? And how has that evolved and changed over time to what it's like now?
Yeah, and I think about it in like 3 different phases. The first phase was early days post-Series A, where it was myself and a demand gen person for like 3 years. Actually, we layered in an events person as well, just given kind of the success we were having on the conference side. And the decision making there was when you make your first marketing hire, which in this case Nick made of me, I think there's probably 2, maybe 3 types of marketers. Demand gen oriented growth quant kind of folks, and creative crazy PowerPoint type people. You're either in PowerPoint or you're in Excel is my thought process. But then there's also product marketers as well, right? But we can, I think, carve that out. And so for me, I've definitely thrived in like a blank whiteboard and PowerPoint and dreaming about something, a big vision. So I needed to hire someone who can be my counterbalance and somebody that was very demand gen kind of focused. And so that worked very well in sort of phase 1. And again, we knew events were a big part of our fold. And so that was kind of literally 2 or 3 years of the company was just us, the 3 of us in marketing. The second chapter, we said, look, we really need to scale this, and particularly on the demand gen side. So we're probably at like 5 million of ARR at that point, maybe a little bit more. And we needed to bring in potentially a new demand gen leader that was going to help us kind of build an office in Phoenix, as you mentioned. In the Bay Area, it's tough to figure out kind of how to scale efficiently here, and sort of a lot of the talent retention kind of challenges that we have. And so part of what Mike, our demand gen leader, did was champion the movement of SDRs away from sales and into marketing. And so that was transformative for us, because more and more we're becoming accountable as marketers to revenue, not just to MQLs in the past, right? Or even ops when we first started. And so we were basically creating a bunch of leads, sending them to our SDR team. And it was a sales team really focused on hitting the number, not as focused on prospecting. I hear that happens out there in the world, and maybe we can validate with the audience. But we wanted to basically say, we wanted to help influence the leads that we were sending over and ensure that actually turned in a pipeline. And I think today the numbers, it's somewhere about 50-50 in terms of SDRs reporting to sales or marketing. But that really helped to change the dynamic of marketing and our strategic importance to growth and driving revenue for the business. And only now in our third chapter are we sort of consolidating some of the different kind of parts of marketing. So we have product marketing that during those first 2 chapters lived in the product management team, just because we were so focused on category creation. Our product was the job, not the technology to some extent. And so product marketing now reports in. We're working on like customer marketing, comms, some of the more traditional stuff as well. So we probably look today more like a traditional marketing team, when in the first early days it was just very bootstrapped, and all of us as a company, I'd argue, kind of piling in together to figure out how to do this how to execute on the vision that we had.
Sure. Again, just kind of touching on some of the things that we spoke about earlier, but as you mentioned, sort of marketers are more and more tied to revenue these days. And again, I think one of the things that can be really hard for people to understand, unless if they've experienced that or go through that themselves, is the value that community can have in terms of really lowering your customer acquisition costs over time as well. But in terms of, is there any kind of form of data capture or metrics that you use to gauge the effectiveness of the community that you're building, and how does that kind of translate for you moving forward?
It's a really good question. I think at various stages of the funnel, I think we can attribute different sort of levers as community growth. At the very top, what we call conversions. So if somebody fills out a form for us, that typically is an indicator of how much is our community, or the number of ears, I guess, and eyes that are paying attention to what we're doing is growing. Now, we look at that on a unique account basis, not just on the individuals that are signing up. So we'll say, we'll report to the board that last quarter, we had 2,500 unique accounts enroll into our community, just in our meta community, if you will. So I think that's kind of the marketing metric around community growth. What's interesting is then how do those deals move through the funnel? And we'll look at different kind of attribution kind of bits and say, well, people that come to our conference have they spend more money with us and they buy 3x faster because of the rapport that we built through our community channels earlier or middle of the funnel. But I think at the end of the day, there is a qualitative aspect that we do track. We have our sales reps, our AEs actually update a field that's either lost reason or win reason. And what we found is just hands down, the reason people buy from Gainsight, in addition to the technology stack, is they want to align themselves with the market leaders. And that is completely driven via our brand investments. And not just marketing, by the way. I don't want to take credit for it. It's the entire company that's really kind of helped build this thing into being something that's perceived as a market leader. And I think what the Play Bigger folks really nailed is the market really values that. They value companies that develop that dominant position in a category. But I think the second bit is just as interesting as loss reasons, where for us, we'll rarely lose to a competitor. What we'll lose to is not now. And we'll hear a lot of qualitative feedback that says, we'll be a Gainsight customer one day, but we just got to figure everything else out. We got to hire our leader. We've got to really figure out what customer success means to us from a strategy point of view. We got to get our board aligned. But when we're ready, we'll be a Gainsight customer. And I think that's indicative of the fact that all of the efforts made on the community side have paid dividends, even to people that aren't ready to buy yet, but one day they will.
Just mindful of time, I do want to touch on the Pulse conference that you brought to Sydney, but just on one of the points that you just raised there was being perceived as a market leader as well, and especially for a startup that's at a relatively early stage that doesn't have the brand presence that Gainsight does. How can founders or startups start establishing themselves as having a presence in the market, or that thought leadership piece?
And again, Gainsight had 8 customers when we started this journey, right? It wasn't and we had a different brand. We were called JBarra Software. So I don't think it's ever too early to do this, but I think what we've always tried to do is punch above our weight. And so, the ability for a company of 19, 20 people to do a 300-person conference is insane. But the learning is the same from whether you're deploying that learning in an event channel or a content marketing channel or what have you. And it's focusing your narrative around the job and not the product and not the technology. So build content, host events that have sessions, do webinars and podcasts and different things that are helping your prospective buyers be better at their jobs. And what that's doing is inherently creating brand value for the company that's delivering that content. And so it's also growing your marketable database. It's giving your SDRs someone to nurture. And inevitably it's someone that enters your funnel and someone you can sell to. So I'll just say that if you can focus on helping the market, helping the customers behind your logos effectively get promoted, then that's really going to be your ticket, even in the early days, really building a larger-than-life brand.
Sure. And obviously super excited to have the Pulse conference coming down to Sydney later this year. Again, for people that maybe not as familiar with the conference, you want to share a little bit about what it's all about and the details for the event.
Yes, so Pulse is not just what I just said. It's not a Gainsight sales pitch. It's not a Gainsight event, actually. We're the hosts, in that we pay the bills and we'll do our part to kind of get folks there. But it's a place that for folks that are in customer success, or are interested in the profession, to basically come together, learn best practices, network with their peers, and be able to celebrate being the few that are really kind of in this net new category. I don't think we can remember the first 200 salespeople in the world, right? But we can remember the first 200 customer success folks. And so we're beyond excited to come to Sydney this year, December 12th, in Darling Harbour. We're learning a lot about the market, so we come very humble, but wanting to basically help advance the interests of this profession within the Asia Pacific region, and particularly in Australia. And so very excited to bring Nick down, bring a lot of folks here, but also to really celebrate the pioneers and the innovators in Australia today in the profession, and help grow our community there locally.
Fantastic. Where can people go to get more details about the conference?
Yep, it's gainsight.com/pulse/APAC.
Great. And tickets on sale?
Tickets are on sale. Yeah. Everything's up and running, and we're going to be doing a lot of content. We're actually working with the folks at LinkedIn to help kind of quantify the state of the profession today within Asia Pacific, and create some benchmarks that we can all sort of acknowledge and celebrate, but also invest in the years to come. So stay tuned. A lot more from us coming locally.
Fantastic. I'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes.
Awesome.
Anthony, once again, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute blast talking to you. For anyone that wants to find out more, say hello, get in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, Twitter, I guess, at Kennada, Kennada, LinkedIn, or stop by in December, and love to get to know you all. And I think that's the best way to do it.
Perfect. Anthony, once again,
thanks
for coming on.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Startup Playbook podcast. I'll be back next week with another episode of the show. In the meantime, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.